Hello everybody and welcome back to Gardens and Crystals with me, Wesley Peterson, and today I have an update video for you, and this update video is all about this beautiful hanging basket next to me here. This wonderful plant is an Aeschynanthus longicaulis, and I think the common names for this plant are black pagoda or zebra basket vine, and I think there are other names for this plant as well. And this plant is in the family Gesneriaceae and is commonly known as the lipstick plant. So there's a lot of different plants in this lipstick plant family, and that's because these plants get lovely trumpet-like flowers on them. Many of them get lovely trumpet-like red flowers on them, dark red, absolutely gorgeous. But this particular species here gets kind of yellow-green flowers. They're not very big, they're not very substantial, they're not very exciting. This plant is much more sought after for its absolutely gorgeous and wonderful foliage, because these leaves have the most amazing patterning on them. On the front side here, you can see they have a lovely green colour, and you can see a slight texture through the green on the leaves. But if we should turn a vine around, or the leaves around, you will see on the back side it has dark burgundy patternings on, and this is just gorgeous and very, very unusual. Very beautiful, striking plant. This plant is above our dining table in our kitchen and has been hanging here in this pot since I brought it home from a home furnishings or design store that had this hanging on the side, and it was very dehydrated, very dried out. But I felt absolutely head over heels for the coloration and the patterning on these leaves, and I hadn't seen this plant before, so I just had to have it. So I went and bought it, and I said to them, if anything happens to the plant, I'd like to be able to come back with it, but I want to give it a chance. And they wrote a little message on my receipt saying that I have, a certain amount of time to test out and see if this plant will thrive and come back from being so dehydrated and so forth. And well, this plant did. This plant is doing absolutely amazing for me. Now at this point, I've had this plant about 9 months, and this summer it has produced a lot of new vines for me, so I know my plant is happy, I know my plant is thriving, and I know it's doing well. And I just love being here when we sit at our dining room table for breakfast, lunch, dinner, or if we're just in the kitchen and I get to look up at this plant, I'm always so happy. It's flushing out a lot. Look how wide it is. Look at these lovely tendrils that are coming down and looking absolutely gorgeous with all these new leaves coming out. So I know my plant is doing well. Now in a moment I will take you in and give you a closer look at all the foliage and this burgundy colour under the leaves and on top. But before that, I just want to give you some care tips about keeping your Aeschynanthus longicaulis happy. This plant needs to be in a well-draining soil, so you can get a good potting mix, and in that you can add orchid bark or some other kind of bark that you find. You can add perlite, you can add lacquer balls, and you can make a kind of mixture with all different kinds of things that allow the soil to drain through. If you have this plant in a pot where it has a drainage hole through the bottom, that's absolutely perfect and ideal and the best for this plant and any other plant, of course, so that when you water it through, all of the nutrients and so forth will go through the pot and out of the bottom, and then you'll be able to go and fertilize your plant in the growing season and not worry about a build-up of minerals and so forth in the soil. So I have this plant in that kind of soil, but it's in a hanging basket here, and this hanging basket doesn't have any holes in it whatsoever for drainage of water. So I have to be very careful when I water this plant. The plant does like to stay moist, but it doesn't like to be soaking wet or sitting in water for too long, because otherwise it would get root rot. But this plant does like to stay moist. So it can take shorter periods of drying out, but not too long. That would also damage the roots quite a lot. So I just go in with one of these, a trusty water gauge, and it shows me when it's wet, moist and dry. I put this into the soil, as so, and then I will see if this plant needs to be watered. So this is very important for me because if I should overwater this plant, there's nowhere for the water to go and the plant would rot out. But so far, I've been doing this okay because my plant looks very happy. Another thing about this plant is that it comes from a tropical environment in Asia. So it's a plant that originates from places like Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, areas like that where it has high humidity and bright indirect light, which is what it really likes. So this plant does like to be misted over to keep the leaves clean and fresh and to give it humidity on its leaves and around it. And that is really what keeps this plant happy. Now the plant does absolutely fine in a normal home temperature environment, no lower than 16 degrees Celsius in the winter months or anything like that, and around about 25 degrees is also fine for this plant. So during the summer, when it gets warmer than that, it will do fine too. And when I say that, I'm talking about a good range is between 16 and 25 degrees Celsius, and above is also fine, but not below 16 degrees Celsius because that would be too cold. This plant is a warm, loving plant and it likes high humidity. But this plant is doing very well in our kitchen environment. Our apartment is quite warm, gets quite humid, and I do go over and spray my plant and keep it happy that way. The plant does like a lot of bright light. But when I say that, I mean bright indirect light, of course. If this plant should be in bright direct light behind glass, you are going to burn out the leaves of the plant. It doesn't like that at all. But bright indirect light is what you need to keep this plant happy because then it will carry on growing out on its new tendrils here. It will grow out big, long, oval leaves that look absolutely gorgeous. And if it's not getting enough light, it will grow out long, straggly tendrils with smaller leaves, and then it will never have the energy either to produce any flowers for you. And during the summer this year, this plant did flower for me, so I got to see these orangey, yellow, greeny, small flowers. And that's how I know they're not very showy, but it's still very nice because it shows that the plant is happy and it's getting the right amount of light and humidity and so forth to keep it happy and give it the energy to produce the flowers. I've heard that this plant can get different kinds of bugs when it's indoors, so it can get thrips and it can get mealybugs and spider mites and red mites and aphids and all sorts of things, but that is very rare for this plant. It really doesn't get bugs very often, and my plant has never had anything on it. It's absolutely wonderful. It's hanging here, it's not near any other plants, and nothing can really get onto this plant. So it's been perfect. I haven't had that trouble. But if you do have any kind of trouble with yours, with any kind of insects and bugs, then you can get yourself an organic insecticide and spray over your plant. You can use neem oil, spray over the plant, put neem oil in the water when you water the plant, and make sure you just keep the foliage as clean as possible. You can take it to your shower and hose it all off. If you're somewhere that's warm, you can have it outside and hose it off, of course. So there are lots of different things you can do to keep it happy, but don't worry, this isn't a plant that is this species isn't highly susceptible to those kind of bugs as far as I have had the experience of. That could be different in different countries, different areas and different environments, of course. When it comes to propagating this plant, what you need to do is you need to take a few stem cuttings. So you'll go in and take some new fresh stem cuttings in the spring or when the daylight hours are longer, wherever you're living, and take off like the bottom 2 layer of leaves so that you'll have node areas where roots can grow. And you will be placing these stem cuttings into a potting mix that you will keep moist, so you can use a seeding potting mix or any kind of potting mix you have, as long as it can drain but stays moist. And the best thing to do would be to put these in that potting mix in a plastic bag so you keep a humid environment, and then leave these plants in a bright, indirect position to grow. They need the light, they need the humidity, they need the moisture, otherwise they will not work. They are not going to be the easiest propagations for you, but if you have all the things that are necessary for it, then you will be able to get yourself a new plant. It could take a few weeks for these to root out, and the only way you can test that is if you tug on them after maybe a month, for example. Tug on the stem and see if the plant doesn't come up easily, then it's got roots. If it comes out, you know it's not got roots, right? But that's the way to do it with this plant. Soil propagation is a very good method in a plastic bag and keep it moist. Now I want to go back to the fact that this plant is in a hanging basket like this. This means that the soil is not going to be able to drain through, so there could be a build-up, as I said earlier, of minerals and other substances in the soil, and also at the same time the plant will use up all the goodness that is in the soil of the pot very quickly because it only has that. And so you're going to have to go in maybe once a year or so and change out the soil of your plant to make sure it gets fresh new soil and there isn't too much of a build-up of anything that could upset your plant and cause it to wither away in the end. So I've had this plant hanging here now like this, as I said, for 9 months. And when I potted it in this pot, I just put it in the middle of this pot with new soil around, so it was still in the original soil in the middle. These plants don't get huge roots, they don't get huge root balls, they don't need a huge area, and in fact these plants like to be a little bit more pot bound to keep them happy. A pot that's too big for them and too much soil that is too wet is only going to rot out your plant. It's not going to help it. It's not going to encourage it to grow. It likes to be more compact to keep it happy. The roots aren't big. But in a situation like this, as I said, I will have to go next spring, get this plant down, take it out and give it some fresh soil just before it starts growing in the springtime. And then I hope that will boost the plant to grow out lovely new tendrils, lovely new leaves and flower. And then it will also have a lovely fresh environment in this pot. So don't think that it can be hanging in this pot for years on end because your plant will start deteriorating otherwise. So at the moment my plant is very happy, it's bringing out lots of new tendrils and I'm just happy with the situation as it is. So now with all that said, let's go in and have a closer look at all of these beautiful leaves on this plant so you can see why I love it so much and I'm so pleased with it. And I've had a few viewers now been asking me to do an update video on this plant, so now I've got round to doing it and now you can see my plant is still happy in this situation that it's in. And I've also had viewers that have said that they've not been able to find this plant at all where they live. For example, I had someone from the UK that said that she couldn't find this plant. So I don't know how rare this plant is in certain countries and areas. But as I said, even here, where I live in Sweden, I haven't seen this plant before. So when I saw it, I just grabbed it and ran, even though it needed some work to bring it back to life again, just like this. And since then, I have seen it in different places, but much smaller than my plant here, nowhere near as big as this. So I am very, very pleased with this plant. So let's go in for a closer look. So that's all I have for you for this video with my beautiful Aeschynanthus longicaulis, this lipstick plant, the black pagoda or the zebra basket vine. Gorgeous plant. If you can go out and find yourself one, I really suggest you do so. So, Thank you very much once again for watching Gardens and Crystals with me, Wesley Peterson. Please remember to like, subscribe and hit the bell so you know when my next video will be coming up. And I will see you again very, very soon. Goodbye.